Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Shadow and Bone Episode 2. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. We actually learned, like I said, a lot of really interesting things, kind of picking up, kind of a little bit in the past. Obviously, we learned a little bit more about how the Grisha, process becomes. Obviously, it's if you become a Grisha, obviously, life is kind of a little more set for you, especially for those kids who are orphans, kind of living on that side of things. So it's if you get chosen, it's but it's a whole process. And it's well, how do you get chosen? And, Mal was asking, the kid was they don't test you if you're sick or injured, which I think that comes a big part later on. I didn't quite think about it at the time. But basically, Mel had, Alina had her and Mal, run away. Because she, if we got tested and one of us turned out to be a Grisha, the fact is we would be taken away. It's if we're going to go anywhere, it's always going to be together. So, and obviously picking up, now it's Alina gets taken to Kerrigan, and it's I was told, what are you? And she's I'm a map maker. It's no, I'm nobody special. And it's who saw what happened? And it was no, I saw it. She's a sun summoner. And they say the instead of a, because once again, I think what Kerrigan is and what Alina is as a sun summoner, that later on the term Darkling gets used. I don't know if that's the official titling, an Inferni or a Squalor. We also heard Tide Baker. I'm assuming that's essentially the waterbenders of this universe. Which there's something later on that makes me wonder: is that waterbending or is that just something else? I'll get to it in a second later, but. I think Kerrigan's kind of in the same shape as her, at the very least. His powers, it's very rare. It might be I don't know if it's necessary. I don't know if being a Grisha is, you would assume it might be bloodline related, so that makes me wonder, it had to be, his ancestor that created Fold, or maybe it is a thing of just, a random draw, who knows, her being a sun summoner. They make it seem like it's only a one. It's not every 1,000 years. I mean, maybe, but it's, currently where things are, it's more it's there's one and you get one, that's it. So that's why she's so important, because it's if she gets killed, we're all screwed. But, Kerrigan's wanting to test her, because obviously Mal is there's no way she's a Grisha. Oh my god, if they find out the truth about her, that she's not one, they're gonna kill her or hurt her. But then obviously we see I guess that's how why the test is you can't be sick or injured, because because Grisha don't actually get sick. Maybe that's what that's kind of implying. And it says you can't be injured because once your blood is spilled, obviously we see what her circumstances, but I'm assuming that applies to everyone, because it seemed like Kerrigan was actually using his powers at the time he was cutting her. So I don't know if that played a role in it or not, but obviously she's, instead of bleeding, she shoots out light. I think it's special circumstances. Either the thing he used to cut her is because I was how could, because there's no way you go in your entire life not bleeding. I mean, to be fair, even when the creature grabbed her, but I guess it's maybe its talons never went inside of her to stab her, so maybe that's what the Volker last episode, maybe that's what that's why I'm I don't know how that 100% works, whether that was just kind of a Kerrigan doing something, or maybe that tool is very special that is able to draw that out. I don't know. Because I was how do you go your entire life not bleeding? But maybe that's kind of the point, too. Because later on, you see that she has a wound on her hand. And part of me was is it kind of insinuating she has known for a long time what she is, but she didn't want Mal to know because, she didn't want anyone to know that she was Grisha. She just wanted to deny it. She's been denying it now, but it's she's probably been denying it her entire life. So she's always probably made sure never to be in a position where she got hurt in front of others, because she would have bled light. So she probably knew for a young age what she was, and that's why she ran off with Mal. She was probably making that excuse because she knew that they'd be taken away from each other. She'd end up inadvertently leaving him behind, because we saw Mal's hand when he was younger, so it's kind of implying he was injured, so there's no way he's actually Grisha, so I wonder, I guess it's there inside of you from a very young age, or maybe it's a thing that happens, maybe once you reach a certain age, kind of like puberty, it kicks in, because it's kids, come get tested, but I guess it's not you can be tested as a baby to have it. It's I think it's just a thing of, you have to reach a certain age before your power, ends up coming to term or something like that. but she is, the sun summoner, and so she's being taken away. She wants to see Mal. She said that's also the thing too. She said, "I didn't know," and that's the thing. That's hard to say. Like, well, was she saying the truth when she said that? Like, or that was just her lying because she didn't want Mal to know she's kind of been lying to him their entire life. I don't know. I feel like it's leaning more towards she did know and she's just been lying, but maybe it is a thing. Like I said, it's just like the scar on her hand. It looks like it was like a deep scar. Like, I don't know if it was a burn or whatever it is, but like the way her hand looked made me think like, oh, like she probably knew from a younger. I don't know. I could be misinterpreting that, but what we kind of end up learning too, it's like for, Alina, it's like, no, just let me go back. Like, wouldn't it make more sense to get the first army to take it? It's like, no, we're the second army. Like, we're the ones that are going to be looking after you. She got introduced to, was it like Fredor? And the first guy she ends up talking to as well. I don't think they ever gave his name. I know, Fredor's the only one that gave his name. I don't think the other dude that was like, nah, you're coming with us. Like, you have to. Because they're taking her to the little palace. And I thought that was an interesting conversation because for her, it's like, just if you were to leave me back there, no one would notice. Fredor's like, why wouldn't? Like, you're special. And she's like, are you serious? Like, she's like basically saying because of who she is, it's like being different. Like, you basically, it's a fight your entire life. But it's like, oh, I guess you wouldn't know that growing up behind, like, living in the little palace, behind the walls of the little palace. But it's like, no, we're behind the walls of the palace because the Grisha weren't always accepted. We were, like, frowned upon, because we were, they kind of hinting like, oh, we were the freaks. Like, yeah, we know what it's like to be different and hate it for being different. And it's like, if it wasn't for Kerrigan building the little palace for us to have a place to call our own, like, we spent so much time being in fear because so many people didn't like us. Now we're able to show our strength and kind of inflict fear. So that's kind of why I think Grisha kind of have that like attitude about it. We saw it last episode, like, oh, they can kind of be dicks, can't they? But now it's like, oh, well, you've basically been persecuted like before now. Like, of course you're gonna have a little bit of like a nah, fuck you, like kind of attitude about it. Granted, I'm sure like that's kind of where it started, but I think it just kind of trails back to being like the thing of like, oh, like you're kind of like treated differently as a Grisha anyway. So I'm sure that kind of gets you a little pig-headed and stuff like that. Regardless, you kind of get big-headed, but I think it's a little bit of a balancing act of like the history of being persecuted for being different, but also like now that you're hot shit, like you start flexing a little too much because it's like, like, oh, we were kind of being pushed back against because we were different, but it's like now we don't have to worry about it. We show our strength and they're the ones that are afraid, not us, so it's kind of almost like that bully type of thing. It was kind of interesting learning that, but like Fredor and that other dude, that's what I was referencing earlier. I'm like, are they like the tide makers? Because they were like, it looked like it's just kind of like almost like a telekinesis, but I was wondering if they were like, and I said water bending because I was like, was that them blood bending? I don't know whether that's what that was or whether it is just like a straight up, nah, we're telekinesising. Because, I mean, to be fair, they're wearing a different uniform. Because later on, there's like, oh, we need a squaller because of like the smoke grenade or whatever. So it's like, they're not squallers. So there's definitely something else. I mean, there's healers. There was also, I don't know if it was a healer or someone else, but it's like, oh, count their heartbeats, and one of them was about to start doing that. So it's like the full list of what they can. Well, that might have been a heart renderer, because obviously a heart renderer can like control a heartbeat, but maybe it also like can also be used in that means as well. So maybe that's a heart renderer, or maybe that's like, what they can be used on the battlefield as, or maybe that's like something else entirely. But then you had your boy Kerrigan showing up and being the badass that he is, literally slicing a dark wave across, and it slices that dude in half. I was like, oh, at first I was like, oh, you sliced his hand. Oh no, you just sliced his entire torso in half. It's like, cool. I was like, I guess I don't know why. It's like, it's like I saw the violence, and once again, it's that thing of like, oh, it's TV-14. I just didn't think it to get. I mean, it's not graphic, but it was more graphic than I was expecting. I was like, oh. Once again, it's like there's a lot you can get away with in a TV-14 that I kind of don't keep in mind a lot of times. Because I guess in my head, when I hear like TV-14, I think like PG-13, and like obviously there's limits to what you can include in that. But it's like the lines skirting between probably like a TV-14 and a TVMA, like there's probably like just a little smidge of this could like easily tilt in that direction. Regardless, it's just me going on a tangent, but I was also interested too to learn that like obviously the uniforms that the Second Army wears, the red. I was like, yeah, it's meant to be bulletproof. So that's why like a lot of those guys attacking used weapons that weren't just like bullets. They also used like weapons that would like stab, because they knew that would kind of puncture through those suits and stuff like that. So, but they're also prepared because like there was an Inferni, and I think they did something to her hands to make it so that she couldn't fight back. But it seems like their thing was like, yeah, like they're like one of those like countries that tries to like invade Ravka, and it's like, yeah, so yeah, they come here to like either kill or kidnap Grisha, probably either using Grisha as, you know, their own, or, you know, maybe killing him, because it's like, yeah, you guys, because she was like, I'm not Grisha, and the guy was like, what you are is a witch. So either they frown upon Grisha because they were like, oh, you're like essentially kind of like a disdain against God, like you're unnatural, so maybe that's what it might also fold into like the fold, and that is such an interesting conversation between Kerrigan and Alina. It's because he's trying to make her realize like, oh, you have a gift. She's like, gift? I'm going to be, you literally told me I'm basically going to be hunted for the rest of my life. And he was like, it has a nonchalantly and half jokingly, but also seriously being like, yeah, you get used to it. It's like, yeah, that's the sad reality. But once again, it's like, I thought it was so interesting because once again, the first episode made Grisha seem like entitled assholes. And now this other episode kind of flips the script a little bit, makes you go, actually, they're actually kind of persecuted people, and they're just trying to find their way in the world. I mean, a lot of people hate them, so it's a thing of you rather be feared than loved, because no one's going to love you. People hate you, so they might as well fear you, you know? That's the only way you can kind of protect yourself in this world, which kind of coincides with, like, Alina. Alina knows, you know, her and Mal kind of deal with, you know, kind of, you know, life was raised them to kind of just be all about survival, so, like, there's actually a lot in common between Alina and Grisha already, you know? So I just thought that was fascinating. But for him, he's just understanding. He's like, wait, you're saying no to it all? It's like, you don't get to just say no to this. Because, and this is, no, I don't think it was actually in the conversation with, it was actually with Fredor. Like, that's where I was thinking the conversation is, where it's like, you being a Sun Summoner is badass on multiple levels. One, it's because, yes, you can get rid of the fold, sure. But a Grisha created the fold. If a Grisha can get rid of the fold, then maybe we won't be hated as much, and we won't have to hide behind the walls of the little past. I was like, whoa, that's sad to think about. Like, oh, like, so, like, getting rid of the fold means a lot. It's like, especially for it to be a Grisha to do it, because it would kind of rectify history a little bit, you know? But obviously that's also a thing too, like during the conversation, it's like, you know, the conversation came up last episode. It's like, well, why not get Kerrigan to get rid of the fold? It's like, yeah, but it'd be like adding fire to a fire. It's just going to make things worse. Even he's like, yeah, I've tried to, but if I go inside there, all I am is a beacon to the Volcra. And I'm like, I'm just make things worse if I try, you know, using my powers. So, and even saying like, he said like a summoners, so I don't know whether that's kind of supposed to apply to everyone or whether that's just specifically hinting to like it's something like that slicing of the air like that, because he basically talks like there's essentially science-wise, he's like basically there's molecules in everything, and that basically even, you know, in the air, in the shadow, and I'm able to kind of take that and like slice. And so he's like, it takes a lot of training. He says the summoners can do it, so I don't know whether like everyone would be considered a summoner, or was he just specifically referencing Alina in that case? Or it could, like I said, just could be everyone in that case, including Alina, but saying like she could do a version of that herself. It just takes a lot of training. But for him, it's like, it's kind of like a last resort. It's like, I don't do it. Because he's like, because she was asking her, he's like, would you have preferred if I used a sword? And she's like, I don't know. Because also that is scary to know that he could just slide, but we don't know like the full extent of that. Like, could he use it continuously? Will it take its toll on him? Like, we don't know like how like the stamina situation works with these abilities. Like, can you go infinitely, or will you just your natural stamina? Like, if you run out, you just get tired and you can't. Like, is there a limit to this? Or is it limitless? Once again, I keep making comparisons like the Avatar. Because I know this is based on a book, but I've never read the book. So, like, the closest thing I can compare it to in some thought process, like I said, because I brought it up last episode, and I've talked about this episode, was Avatar: The Last Airbender, because it's kind of like a reference point that I feel like a lot of people can kind of draw from and understand, but it's like a reference point I have in kind of comparison to these abilities and stuff. But also you have Alina kind of admitting to him, like, yeah, I hid, you know, me and Mal hid what we, you know, away from it, like being tested. So it's like, oh, you went your entire life, you know, because that was also a point she was making. It's like basically being hunted for the rest of your life. You're like wondering like, oh, you're saying like I might be the only Sun Summoner. There might be others out there that just haven't found who just don't want to be found, and maybe that's a possibility. Because I'm sure there's other people that would like jump at the opportunity to be one, just because it's like to be a Grisha, be like, yes, get me out of my situation, get me out of squalor, get me away from, like, I'm sure like that was like every kid's dream, kind of growing up and everything at that orphanage, just to be like, yes, an opportunity to get out of here, to get a better life, to have a better social status, essentially, so a lot of that was kind of interesting. And obviously, it was also like this sad moment of like obviously showing up at the little palace and everything. It's like and for Alina, it's like, oh, am I a prisoner? He was like, all of Ravka is until the fold is dealt with. Until you and me deal with the fold. And she's like, no pressure. But the moment she gets in the room, she breaks down just because it becomes too much. She just kind of had to keep up this strong front, like everything was okay. But then she kind of breaks down behind doors. And like the moment she hears footsteps, she tries to like, okay, like calm herself down, because she doesn't want anyone to kind of see her kind of being weak. Because it's also something they brought up last episode. It's one of the things in the orphanage. Don't let anyone ever see you cry. Like, you don't let people see your feelings. Like, you got to stay strong, kind of keep that buried deep inside. So that's kind of coming full circle. But once again, always have a knife. So she ends up finding like a letter opener or knives, and so she kind of hides it under her pillow. So we see like a lot of like her upbringing. I honestly didn't think about it until I started sitting here talking about it. I didn't realize that until I'm recording it and saying it now, piecing it together. Like, right, those are the rules from the orphanage her and Mal grew up in. Which Mal was trying to, like, on multiple occasions be like, yo, we got to go after her. But, like, their commanding officer's like, no. They'll find out she's the fraud that she is. And, that's Second Army business, not ours. But it's like, until they rolled up, that was, like, one of your people. But for him, it's like, it's too much trouble. And he basically breaks down the whole thing of like, for so long, people were like, oh, Grisha were like worth 50 of my men. And then like, obviously the war front got stronger in the sense that like more weapons were developing. It's like the moment the pistol was invented, it was like, oh, they're worth 20. And now it's a situation of like, oh, like, one out of every 10 people that died was a Grisha. So it's a situation of, that's a ratio they could live with, So for him, it's like eventually it's going to get to the point that they recognize that Grisha are just as useless as the rest of us. Because it's like, it's that interesting fantasy, it's like science fictional thing of like, right, you have all this magic shit going on, but then like obviously you have like the more technological advancements in warfare to kind of counteract that. And so it is kind of like, it's not as one-sided as you think. Like, the thing of like, oh yeah, like magic can't straight up beat science, especially when you're dealing with like, rapid firing rifles and stuff like that. It's like, it's kind of, it's not like a 1-for-1, like, like I said, it's not like a clear, like, one-sided, like, oh, this is like, the Grecians have it like 90-10. It's like, no, it can easily probably be 50-50, maybe even like 60-40 in the sense that, like, Grecia being 40, 60 being 10, so I just think that's such a fascinating element as well. But Mal's friends end up stopping him from trying to go track down Alina on his own, because like, what are you going to do, sneak into the little palace? There's people in there who will just get a clear sight of you, they can kill you. Fact of the matter is, earn a medal, get into the little palace by, proving yourself, like, because you need like a special invitation to get to the little palace. So it's like, prove yourself, get a medal and stuff like that on the battlefront, and you can kind of have your wish. So I'm assuming that's where we're going to get with Mal's side of the story, whereas Alina's doing that. Because it's like, because Zoya was saying like, oh, she's taken care of, but like for Mal, it's like she's not going to be okay around the Grisha, just because it's like those aren't her people. Like, the fact of the matter is, I'm her people. I'm who she knows. This is the world she knows. It seems like that's kind of what he was kind of getting at. But so, and then we had that moment at the end where like they're kind of reaching for each other's hands, even though they're so far apart. Thinking of that, once again to that meadow and everything. So there's that side of things. Then we slide back over to Kaz's circumstances. Like, okay, you got a couple hours to sunrise until Dreesen's kind of like giving us little to no choice. And it's like, he's trying to come up with something, but Inej is like, I've known you enough to know the look on your face that like you're trying to figure things out. But Inej is also like, look at my mark. I can't leave. At first I was like, is that like a special tattoo in the sense that like it's enchanted or something, so like you literally can't leave? But it's like, no, it's supposed to represent you're someone's property, and it's like, I'm not allowed to leave this city without her permission. Helen, it's the woman, like essentially like the person Kaz is basically loaning Inej from. And so obviously he says something insensitive to her in the sense of like, you know, she's like, you can't go without me or whatever. But he was like, you know, what are you going to do about my circumstances? He's like, well, then we'll just have to leave you behind. And it's hard to say what Inej and Kaz's relationship is. Like, maybe he sees her as someone, like, he makes it kind of seem like, oh, I only want you for your skills, but maybe it is a thing of, I do care about you. And for her, she probably, like, maybe on sometimes she's like, oh, well, like, I do matter to you, but in other times it's like, oh, I'm just kind of a means to an end to you. But regardless, Pekka shows up later on and is like, yo, you're going to give me this job? Either you're going to tell Dresden, like, oh, you're bowing out the job and it gets given to me, or I'm going to take your cane and I'm going to bash your head in with it. Kind of a better choice. And then he was basically, which I didn't think I didn't bring it up last episode, but isn't that, the actor who plays Kaz, isn't that Jack, John Ripper's, it's not his son, it's his nephew, right? From Pennyworth. Isn't, I believe that's the same actor. I could be mistaken. But, you know, Kaz had asked the question of, like, oh, have we ever made a deal before? He's like, no, if we had, like, basically, it was one thing and then another one was like, or you'd be dead. Because it's like, and so it was like, okay, I was like, why would you ask that question? And then later on when he's meeting with Jesper, it's a thing of like, okay, I ran into Pekka. It's like, did he recognize you? And it's like, no. If he had, I'd be dead. So it's like, they have some history and some past. Because even Inej, when she was talking to Jesper, being like, there's something up with like, she's like, Pekka is not, because it's like, oh yeah, Pekka, he's like the like one true villain in this town, which is interesting considering it's a kind of a town of villainy, of just kind of like doing whatever you want. Kind of like, you know, the scum of like, you know, a lot of scams and terrible stuff goes down, but it's like, oh, he's like the one true villain to the point like, hell, he gets the stat watch to like literally look the other way when he gets away with murder. But like for Inej, it's like, no, like whatever his deal with Pekka is, like Kaz, it's like personal, it's revenge. So it's like, and then later on, like for Jesper to be like, did he recognize you? Meaning he knows, but Inej doesn't. So I'm assuming, like, obviously Jesper and Kaz go further back. So I think that's kind of interesting. Is like what that personal history is. It might be a family thing of like basically he like killed all of Kaz's family, and it's like Kaz might be the only one in his bloodline of. So it's like a thing of you wanted to wipe out a bloodline, and if you found out who I really was, you'd want me dead too. So. It's not just about, I mean, I'm sure it might be a thing of, I want to overtake you money and position and, you know, power-wise, but also I probably want to kill you. It might be that, we don't know. Kaz just doesn't have the power and connections probably necessary to do that now. But Helen calls for Inej and is offering her a job. Also, we saw those damn knives and stuff like that, so... which is like, man, you keep a lot on deck, don't you? And so it's like, okay, obviously, you know, Kaz sees some importance in you, and it's like, okay, so if he can't pay off your debt, you could end your debt tonight by killing someone for me. It's like, who was he and what did he do? It's like, does it really matter? You do this for me, your debt is cleared, you know? So, but it has to be done tonight. But, obviously, that's a thing, too, because for one, we find out later on, I guess because of her faith, Inej doesn't kill. Like, she'll do kind of some dirty work, but it's like going that far. You know, because even later on, she was asking Jesper to do it for her, but it is like, I mean, that's fine. He's like, but you know, you getting me to kill someone doesn't absolve you. And she's kind of like, yeah, but for her, it's like, this is her only chance for freedom, because Kaz, there's no way he's going to have the money necessary to get her out. And it's like, this is a one-shot deal. This is a one-offer deal of, like, making this all go away. But also, like, Inej is pretty good at it, because even just being like, how the hell did she did it again? The whole, like, just disappearing into thin air thing. I can't tell whether it seems like Jesper kind of has a thing for her or not, because part of me was, like, wondering if there's, like, is that going to turn into a love triangle thing, or whether there's more to that or not, I don't know. It just seems like, I mean, Jesper just seems like kind of like the flirty playboy type, but I don't know if there's anything, like, serious between Kaz and Inej, whether it's just like a friendship thing or whether there is something more, or whether it is like, you know, a Jesper and her thing. But it's like, you know, for him it's obviously sneaking into the little palace and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, that'd probably be better for Inej than me. You know, he's like that, you know, my thing is like shooting with style and stuff like that. But it's like, oh, we're in Pekka territory. It's like, yeah, because he has to meet up with Poppy, because it was interesting because that lady that was counting the money, and it was like, oh, like, I know you're not from Ravka because they count money from one hand to the other. The way you're counting shows that you're from like the East or whatever. So it's like you crossed the fold. How'd you do it? It's someone known as the conductor, but first he has to meet someone named Poppy, and it's like, okay, me and Poppy got history. All right, that's Poppy potentially would be my lead to finding this conductor. So he meets up with Poppy, and I love Jesper kind of acting as a distraction and like basically shooting, and he being really quick on the draw that he's like basically firing a shot, and he's like, oh my god, and the guys are like, was that you? And he's like, I don't know, no, like where did that come from? And doing it again, and literally the barrel to his gun is smoking at his waist. It's like, I love that, him being like, yeah, that's crazy. It's like, oh, was that Sino? Is that pew? And just like he's really quick on the draw. So I think we're definitely going to be seeing a lot of that this season. But Kaz meets with Poppy, and it turns out like, okay, you're connected to like the conductor and everything. Obviously they know each other because like, right, you screwed me out of a deal. It seems like it was specifically the Crow Club. I guess like Poppy didn't get a slice of that. It kind of became all of Kaz's. It seems like that's what that's about. But it turns out that, you know, Helen is gunning for the conductor as well, and it's like, of course she is, because she knows what I'm trying to do, so it's kind of a middle finger to me, I guess, because in her own right, it's like, Kaz is a, another player in town in the sense of like, you're a business rival, not necessarily in the same venture, but also like, if I can get rid of you, I can absorb your territory, your business and stuff like that, and expand my own. So I think that's what it's about. So like by screwing him out of this job from Dreesen, it's like, oh, I'm kind of enriching my circumstances, essentially is what it seems like they're setting up. At least what they were setting up. So it's like, right, Poppy, you sending that message to the conductor to warn them. Basically, all Helen had to do was like send someone to follow the messenger, and then we find out like, okay, like Inej, like the moment that got set up, you're like, Inej is trying to kill the conductor without even realizing it, because like Helen is like, oh, like this person sells this person's competition. She knew what buttons to press to kind of push Inej because of her personal situation of being put in this world, separated from her brother when they were kids. It's like, and she has no idea where her brother ended up. And for the conductor, he's like, dude, I have no idea what that's all about. Like, that's not my world. I smuggle people, yes, but I don't like put people in this slave indentured servitude lifestyle and stuff. But luckily, Cash shows up in time and be like, you have to stop. He's our way in. And for her, it's like, oh, so like this job is more important than my freedom. And Cash says like, you're making it seem like they're exclusive. Like, who's to say they're not one and the same? So it's like, conductor, you're going to do something for me. So to pay off Inej's debt so that she can at least leave town, it's like, he's offering collateral, and then he's like, I'm going to come back with the money necessary to pay off. Because it was a thing of Kaz being like, if I actually show up with the money, Helen's just going to raise the price just because it's like, oh, Inej is so important to you, I can get some more money out of this. And it's like, oh, Jesper's like, how do you know? He's like, because I would do that. That's the scummy business person thing to do. So me and her are the same mind and ilk, so that's why. But for him, he's offering up his club as collateral. She's like, oh, that's cool. Kind of, I think, works at the end of the day, because it's like, oh, this being your collateral, this is kind of what I've been gunning for anyway. And it's like, all right, Inej is yours to lose, along with everything else. So we'll see kind of how that turns out, whether like this gamble of Kaz's will work out, because obviously it's like he's going to need Inej. Because it's specifically, it's like, I'm going to need you, because the conductor is a smuggler, getting across the fold, but probably also getting into the little palace. So these storylines are so separate, but obviously they are going to converge heavily, considering like, yeah, this is all about Alina. Once again, that's the thing of like, how the hell does so many people know? It's like, well, hell, like everyone saw the light show from the fold, and probably whispers already started spreading. Obviously, we see how Dreesen got the information, so it's definitely going to be interesting to see where all this takes us going forward into the next episode. Like I said with the previous recording, hopefully I'm releasing these all within the same day, so the next review should be up fairly soon, if it isn't already. If you're listening to this in the far future, hopefully everything's already like all out not all at once, but at least spread out enough that it's not like congested like anyone's subscription feed. But regardless, I'm really interested to see where the next episode takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.